Hey all, Toves here, back playing some more Planet Zoo, and welcome back to Tiguidou Zoo. So, in the last episode, we added this little Wolverine habitat. Kind of big view window, all set on a slope. Good views of the Wolverine, who's actually just kind of chilling on his little climbing frame at the moment. But the thing that we didn't do in that last episode, which we're going to round out today, is at the back of the habitat is this little slope that runs down out of the view of the guests. So if you're looking in through that window there, you can't see the Wolverines going down and through this little tunnel, and at the moment they come out to nowhere. So this episode is going to be, we're filling in this space. So Wolverine's habitat is pretty small at the moment, and obviously they don't have any indoor shelter and stuff, so that's what's going to be happening here. And it's going to be a little challenge because this is a really awkward little shape that I've left myself, but yeah, hopefully we get something done. So we're going to jump over to the speed build and I will meet you there, guys. Right, so this is, as I said, this is a really awkward little space, and I'm trying to achieve, probably trying to achieve quite a lot with this, because I want it to be both kind of indoor shelter area, but also an area that the guests can view them indoors. So this is actually the same build set that I used for the stable building, so just kind of following that path shape. I didn't really have much of a plan other than that I wanted it to fill this space, so it kind of ends up evolving quite a bit. There's also, even to make it even more of a challenge, as you can see, this path is slightly sloping down the hill, as we're going kind of across the hill, but it's also going down. So yeah, just following the shape of that point at the moment, and then just putting some windows in. Decided started to get a bit of a picture that I wanted a door into this. Obviously, I wanted there to be several little rooms inside, and some windows that the guests would use. There's actually going to be two parts to this. This inside space is going to get a bit more stuff done to it in another episode. But here's the tunnel kind of linking up. So this is how it works. There's like a little concrete slot that they can come through that little kind of archway and up into this part of the building. So just lining out the floor and all that sort of stuff. So there's a slightly false floor in this because the ground slopes away. So got to add all this concrete in. And it sort of ends up being, I mean, as I sort of said in the last episode, they're like a really small, like the Wolverine's a really small animal. So yeah, it did actually weirdly ended up feeling, once I kind of split it up into several rooms, it ended up feeling like it was actually quite big. So here's me splitting it up, and I'm using the arch shapes here just to create a sort of false wall inside. I do this quite often, actually. Quite often double line my walls and my ceilings with just arch shapes. There's a couple of reasons why that's really useful. Is like they're actually, as a wall piece, they're actually quite thin. So obviously when I've got limited space like I have here, it's actually quite an effective way of reducing the footprint of the wall. But I'm adding some windows in here, by the way. But also the other thing that it does is it makes all that inside space a bit lighter if you can add the sort of reflective surfaces in there, if that makes sense. So yeah, I've now kind of cut this into two spaces, and I've got a bit of an idea of what I'm doing. As you see, you won't see me do all of this in this episode, but you get a little bit of a hint. Decided that this is going to be like a keeper area in this section that we're working on here, but there's going to be like a little incubator. I think maybe the idea was this is going to be maybe for kiwi eggs. That was a plan because obviously we're right up against the quokkas and the Tasmanian devils here. The original plan for this space was that it was going to be an indoor kiwi habitat, but it's probably quite small, and so it's kind of. I haven't fully formed this idea. But I thought this would be quite cool to have little like eggs being incubated, and that maybe there's a little section where you can see some baby kiwis. But yeah, as I said, not entirely sure. So you're just creating myself a little nest. This is supposed to be like a little incubator. It gets a little bit more work done to it. It's supposed to be kind of an incubator that's on guest view. So yeah, you've got the little nest, and we've got little glass panels going in for the window. and then it's all going to be kind of accessible from inside, and then just added some like implied some heaters in. Well, I actually did use the heaters, but ended up turning those off and just doubling them up just to give it a bit more interesting shape. So yeah, as I said, this is going to be it's going to be kind of a sort of laboratory area, if you like a veterinary area, I guess. So the actual inside space for the Wolverines, as I said, there's two sections to this. There's this bit that's like guest facing, and then there's a bit that's not guest facing. So I did a few climbing frames and things in here. Just kind of wanted it to look a bit kind of rough and ready, a little bit rusticy. So some art shapes or some actually some shapes that I've made with the plaster there on just those kind of like pyramid shapes. Don't really know why. I just kind of thought it looked cool. A couple of little bits of climbing, some bedding for them, and then actually I thought the corrugated metal looked really good up there. Just to give it that kind of rustic looky, a bit rough and ready, quite hardy. They're really like notorious for being really kind of tough and quite for their small bit. I mean, a little bit like a honey badger, I guess. A Wolverine. It's sort of in reputation. They've got quite a reputation for being quite sort of little tough guys. So this is then the bit that's not guest facing to this. So this is there's a bunch of these little doors and things that I've added in. So adapting the door that I used in Penguin Point to shut off the animals. So like obviously as I've talked about before, like I like being able to kind of have it implied that the keepers can shut off and control different areas of the habitat, so that they don't have to be in there with the animal at the same time. So this is, you'll see I go quite far with that in this episode. There's actually like a bunch of controls. There's a number of little different doors that are all kind of operated on a chain system, or that's what was implied. So yeah, just that's what's going on in this one. You can see at the moment I've got like a little mesh set there, little cage set, my light cage set from the workshop that I'm used, and that ends up getting changed a little bit because at the moment there's a very small amount of staff area, and there's going to be a slightly bigger staff area. So yeah, it ended up changing the colour of that those art pieces to this like nice green colour, a couple of different shades of green. And then I've got another door going in. This is sort of the same principle, but this one is implied that it's like a lift door. So should the keepers want to just have the animals, the Wolverines, in this indoor section, they can also open and close the access to the outside space. So again, that would be, the keepers want to go in and clean the outside space. They'd want to have the Wolverines not outside, and therefore they'd sort of encourage them inside and then drop that door to keep them in this inner section. So yeah, just added this little like kind of raised thing. It was just basically just trying to create little areas of interest that would allow me to maximise this space in here, and to have the animals as viewable as possible. I've reused these little kind of, I guess, like nesting boxes that I created for the raccoons a while ago. So just put those up on the top of this. Obviously they're implied, the animals don't go in there. It would be really cool to have something like that actually, because like lots of animals will use things like that. And if you'd actually see them in zoos, they'd have these little kind of hideaway boxes and things. But obviously we don't get that in the game, other than the big animal burrow, which is just not really realistic in lots of cases. Adding a bit of grunge and some wear in there, so it looks like it's been used by an animal that's got quite sharp claws and all that sort of stuff. I have got the disco ball in there. I haven't actually ever seen the Wolverines use the disco ball. Again, it's possibly one of those curses of using really kind of tight spaces. Is some of these enrichment items really need a lot of kind of a lot of space around them, otherwise they don't do the animations. It's one of those things. Sometimes you log in and suddenly you notice an animal doing an animation and a piece, using a piece of enrichment that you've never seen them use before. And it can also be that you can have them be accessible, and then the next time you log in, they're not accessible. I wanted a way for the keepers, an implied way for the keepers to get into this inner section, because again, the same principle applies. They would want to clean this inner section, so they would close the door, encourage the animals to be outside or in the inner bit of this area, and then clean that guest viewing area. This was the most challenging, and I kind of knew this was always going to be the most challenging part of this little build, was the roof, because obviously it's a really, really irregular shape. The whole building is sort of, as you can see, kind of curving round, completely non-uniform. So the only option here was really always going to be to do a custom roof. If you've never tackled a custom roof before, they are one of the probably the most challenging things in the game. Generally, custom builds in any sense of the word is they're always more challenging than using the grid pieces or sticking to a square shape. But if you look at, this is quite realistic in terms of the way that these sorts of spaces get used. Like, they're not always going to be boxes, so I'm forced to kind of use a custom roof. But I wanted to make sure there's plenty of light in there. So what you've sort of seen at the start of this process really is getting the angle, making sure that I'm getting the angle of that glass skylight and using that as a guide to create the rest of the shape of my roof. And then I've got to kind of have it curve round. So generally speaking, the smaller the piece, the more you'll get to be able to control the curvature and you'll get kind of more generosity in the shape there. So I've got these kind of two sections. Obviously I want this bit that's got guest viewing to be as light as possible, as much natural light coming in there as I can. But now I've got this sort of challenge that I've got. You can see I've got the glass skylight coming down at exactly the point where I've created my shaped roof. Once I got a piece that I was happy with, I could kind of use that sort of apex of the roof, that sort of gable point of the roof, and copy it round. And then you end up with usually end up with a bit of a gap at the top of your walls that you have to fill in. So again, this is where using art shapes for your walls can be really helpful, because you get a lot of flexibility. You've got small pieces, and then you've got to find ways to bring them all together. So in most of this, again, I'm trying to maximize the amount of space in here, so I don't really want to lose some of this head height in the roof. So I can't just square it all off at the bottom with a ceiling, if you know what I mean. So you see, like, I'm trying to keep all of this stuff clean inside, so I'm trying to push this back up and get all of the shapes right, and it all to follow a natural line. And then we needed obviously a way for, well, again, an implied way for keepers to get into this space. As I said, there's two sections. There's a bit that's got the Wolverines in it, and then there's this sort of sciencey area where we put the nest in. So that's what I'm working on here. Again, you'll see more of this as we go forwards. I think there's going to probably be an episode where I just show you the sort of details of various different bits and pieces. A bit of a catch-all, if you like. Wanted a little window in here, because the idea was that this little room was going to be almost like sort of slightly educational, that it was talking about the processes that the zoos use to keep animals, like conservation, work with the sort of conservation program and all that sort of stuff. Thought it'd be cool at this side of the building to have like an open air bit. So this maybe will be where, if I do end up going with kiwis, that we might see some baby kiwis running around in there, or if we ever do get birds, then this maybe where the birds might appear. I've done that in a few places in Tiguidou, actually. I've sort of provisioned and allowed space for potential future birds that may never come. But so yeah, just trying to match up the edge of the path there, just to tidy up all these edges. One of the, I think I said this in the last episode, one of the challenges of having this sort of underground access way for the animals is that you end up with really difficult kind of terrain bits to kind of to get around and stuff. So there's my little door going in, back to some more on my roof. So yeah, just this. I mean, I think this is. I mean, this is obviously represented in a really short bit of the video, but this took me absolutely hours, as you can imagine, because I really wanted it to look neat and tidy, and I think it turned out pretty well in the end. It's one of those things that, unless, again, if I was to put this up on the workshop, which maybe I'll put this up on the workshop, this building, I'm trying to work out how I could actually put the whole habitat up on the workshop and it actually makes sense to anybody who hasn't got the exact sort of terrain shape that Tiguidou's got. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll find a way of putting this building up by itself. So this then viewing section, this little area here is the light. So that's the skylight going in for the completely backstage area of this habitat. So this is an area that the guests never see. So again, we've just got to fill in some of this roof, keep as much of that natural light as possible. And again, this is not the area, if you remember back to the previous episode, this is not actually at all accessible to the keepers. It's all just implied because we've got the keeper gate going into the main area, the guest facing area of the habitat, just because I wanted to use the enrichment items and stuff. It has always been, it's funny actually, it's not one that you see very often requested on the forums or by any other members of the community, particularly in Planet Zoo, but I do think one of my big asks has always been multiple habitat gates. I just think it would make a real difference to the way that we have our habitats look. So we're getting towards the end now, just trimming this out. We are going to do a little bit of a tour. We might do a little bit of a kind of walking tour of where we are up to on this habitat, so you can see it all in context. Always important just to make these, especially when you've used art pieces, just to trim out your roofs, just to make it look a bit more interesting, a little bit more realistic, because they're quite flat as a texture if you don't do this. So yeah, just trying to cut, and you can see already there like the complexities of the shapes of the roof, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I think it came out really neat. Sometimes that's one of those things that if you've got the patience, it's always been the beauty of Planet Zoo really, and the Planet games in general. If you've got the patience, then you'll get their rewards. Decided I wanted to do the same thing on the inside that I talked about with the walls. So I wanted the inner edge of the roof to be white and not black, or that sort of grey that I've got on the outer edge of the roof. And again, that's to maximise the light that's in here. But also just it gives me a little bit of flexibility to hide away any inaccuracies that I've got in the roof structure. Yes, I'll spare you too much of this, but so you can see me painstakingly kind of lining all of that inside surface of the ceiling out with art shapes. So again, just that extra little bits of detail, I think, really do make a difference, especially when it's a tight space, especially when light's a bit limited. So yeah, right. Okay, so we're getting into this is the backstage bit of the habitat. So wanted to have a little bit that the keepers could come through the door. One of those things that I always try and make sure I do is that there is a way for the keepers to come into the habitat without immediately stepping into an area that would have an animal in it. So there's kind of an airlock system going on, if you like. So again, this is all implied, but they can come inside and they can step into this section, observe the animal should they want to, and then if they need to go into the habitat, actually into the habitat. So just using my light cage kit that I've created a few times. Actually, the top of that was really tricky, so I've had to use a glass piece, and you probably didn't catch that particularly on the speed build, but I duplicated the glass apex piece a number of times in order to have it look like it was a solid or like an opaque piece. This is kind of an implied, said there's lots of little gates. I showed you the little gates that are going on, the kind of gate systems that are being used here. So wanted a way for the keepers to, an implied way for the keepers to control that from outside the habitat. So here's a kind of little, supposed to be like a little kind of winch system. So turn the handle one way, this little chain gets kind of run up through the roof section, traced all round to the door, and then you can obviously open and close the door depending on which way you turn the crank. That's the theory anyway. So yeah, just kind of, I mean, I spent way too much time on this, as is always my way, but yeah, tracing the chain around the roof here so that it kind of runs out of the way. A good way of kind of implying this is just to have these little almost like junction boxes that you don't actually really need to see the chain inside, but it lets you kind of easily change direction. I think this is sort of fairly logical. I mean, I think it makes sense. There's a little bit of I spent a little bit of time thinking about the logic of okay, well, you'd need a chain to open it as well as a chain to close it. So how does that happen? So in some of these cases, maybe there should actually be two chains, but I don't know. So yeah, you've got two different doors, so that's why we've got two different chains. So here's the one inside this is the door that raises and lowers to let the animals into the outside space. Again, you don't have to be in this room to open this door and let them out. Wait, some spotlights, because obviously it's a little bit dark. It's a little bit dark corner, so wait to make sure it's all nice and light in there for the guests. So did that a few times. You can just see the awkwardness of this shape on the inside. It's not perfect. There's definitely a few pieces that I'm noticing as we go through the build or go through this speed build that still need a bit of tidy up. But I think it turned out pretty well. Putting some ventilation in. Obviously, there are probably a bit of a smelly little animal. I don't know, maybe not. So yeah, quite a lot of ventilation going on in this. And then last little detail. So adding in some signs and some educational bits in there. So that's, you just saw I've got a big set that I use for Tiguidou that I just kind of go backwards and forwards and reuse in places. So it all stays in a sort of theme, but you don't have to use the same ones every time. So yeah, I think this one's really turned out really well. As I said, it'll be a little bit of a tour after the speed build's finished, but do let me know what you think of this one, guys. I think it's come together really well. Did get loads of people watch the last video, but so appreciate if you were someone that did. Yeah, we'll have a little bit of a wander around, and I will talk to you about where this fits in the context of everything. Okay, right, so we are starting next to the deer's habitat. So I thought I'd bring you down the hill. You can see where this sits in context of everything else. So we've still got weird big panels up to hide a bunch of things from you that you're not allowed to see yet, I'm afraid. So here's the Tassies. This little kind of Australian section that we've got here, the burrow. Obviously there's now the building, the quokkas doing their thing, and we've got all this needs finishing off, so they've just got this empty room at the moment. There's my kind of little incubator thing. There's another path obviously that goes back towards the deers this way, so down the side of the building. We'll go this way for now. So if we come round, there's another gap there that needs filling, all of which I have already done and you just haven't seen because I haven't shown you yet, but that'll be coming soon. So there's the kind of indoor view of them. I can't remember if I actually left them in there. Yeah, so they're left in there at the moment. So let's just poke our heads through. So this is the way that these are supposed to work. Implied, obviously, doors that open and close. Let's just go back into... Oh, let's jump back into... What am I doing? Oh, pressing all the buttons at the same time. There we go. Let's go back into that camera. Yeah, so obviously this is the view that you would get as a guest. And if that door is open, then the animals can go underneath the path here, back through the tunnel and out to the main bit of the habitat. I'm not going to unpause it because it's getting really framey, as I said in the last one. So here's our little view in there. As I said, lots of natural light. I didn't actually in this section use all of the white. I talked about the lining all the ceiling out here, but I didn't actually do it completely in this section because I don't think it needed it. I think that the natural light coming in really helped. So there's that chain running over the top. So it goes, in theory, it goes through this little junction thing, runs over the top. and goes through that little inlet and goes round and into the habitat. Into the keeper facing area. We'll just nip through this little space here, and we'll go and poke our heads inside. Hopefully, it lets me inside. Yeah, cool. So this is the inside space. Actually, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. Got some this little what's this called? Hygiene station thing that's was part of the backyard animal pack. Really handy for this kind of like hand cleaner sort of stuff that's going on. So we've got 2 little handles. You spin those. As I said, that one opens the gate we just looked at. This one in theory slides this across, and there's like 2 chains coming down there. And then this is where, as I said, that they will come and sleep. So should the keepers want to get them in this area, there's also a little implied sort of drawer thing. You see these quite often. I'm sure I can actually pick this up as a whole group. Yeah, I can. So in theory, the keeper pulls the drawer out, fills it with food, pushes it through, and it stops kind of there, and then the animals can come and eat from it. Again, just a little bit of extra realism. I know that's not how the game works. The game obviously allows the keeper just to walk in there with a dangerous animal, but it's the same with the lions and tigers and all that sort of stuff. So we can open this section, and it was actually a bit of a challenge. I mean, think that if you look at the size of the Wolverine, hopefully we don't put on the roof here, look at the size of the Wolverine, you'd think there'd be no problem it going through these doors, but it's not as easy as that. So that was a problem. Originally I had this coming out square like that, but it didn't work, so I had to kind of cut this little nook in out of it. So that's this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Much appreciated. More to come from Tiguidou, obviously. We'll be back in Zemba soon as well. Catch you on the next one. Take it easy.